All right, so let's talk about some basic periods of human development. Let's first introduce the different stages that we'll go throughout the class. So we'll talk about prenatal development. So this includes like your fetal periods, infancy and toddlerhood, the first couple years of life, early childhood, ages 2 to 5 or 6, middle childhood, ages 6 to 11, adolescence from 12 to 18, early adulthood, late teens, 20s, and 30s. Then we'll move toward talking about middle adulthood, your late 30s or age 40 through about your mid 60s. And then we'll dive into talking about late adulthood and death and dying. And we'll distinguish the difference down the road in late adulthood, the difference between young old versus oldest old. Have I lost you yet? Okay. So whenever we're talking about the lifespan perspective, I want to go ahead and talk about right out the gate that development occurs across one's entire life or is lifelong. This is commonly associated with Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, where comparatively to Freud thinks that your development is kind of set in stone by the time you reach adolescence. His discontinuous theory only reaches up until adolescence, whereas Erikson, his crosses the entire lifespan in unique stages. So development encompasses the entire lifespan from conception to death. Now, the traditional view is focused on conception to adolescence and the gradual decline in old age. And it was believed that the 5 or 6 decades after adolescence yielded little to no developmental change at all, aka Freud's perspective. Now, the current view is that changes in development can occur later in life without having been established at birth. So you can still develop well into your adulthood. As well, development is multidimensional. So we've already established the 3 domains that we will discuss throughout the class. We have the physiological changes. Your physical changes include your hormone levels, primary and secondary sex characteristics, changes in height and weight. And then you've got the cognitive changes, okay? So cognition, remember, equals thinking. So it changes in terms of the ability to think abstractly. And then you've got emotional and social changes, which are involved in regulating emotions, interacting with peers, and possibly dating, aka psychosocial development. So development is multi-dimensional as well as multi-directional, okay, and results in gains and losses throughout life. So we have the capacity for both an increase and decrease in the efficacy of certain traits over the course of the lifespan. So we have this selective optimization with compensation, which is prioritizing and improving the efficacy of particular functions, thereby reducing the adaptive capacity of other functions. So, for example, in childhood, we have difficulty with regulating emotions and impulsive actions. And then in adolescence, we have this increased ability to regulate emotions and impulses, but they may sacrifice spontaneity, creativity, or fast responding. Okay, and development is plastic, and I don't mean the type of plastic that you drink through a straw. Okay, this is talking about that the characteristics that you experience are malleable or changeable. So when I'm referring to something being plastic, I'm referring to it being malleable or changeable. So the nature of human development is more pluralistic than originally thought. There's no single pathway in development. So I want you to consider the example of cognitive decline and aging. So dimensions of cognitive decline are partially reversible because the brain retains the lifelong capacity for plasticity and reorganization of cortical tissue. And research suggests that cognitive functions such as memory can be improved in mature adults with age-related cognitive decline by using brain plasticity-based training methods. As well, development is contextual. So development is influenced by these contextual and sociocultural influences. So this includes development varies from person to person, obviously. So it depends on the context of the situation, depending on factors such as the person's biology, family, school, church, your profession, nationality, as well as ethnicity. And there are 3 types of contextual influences that operate across the lifespan. This includes normative age-graded influences, normative history-graded influences, and non-normative influences. So whenever I'm referring to normative age-graded influences, this is biological and environmental factors that have a strong correlation with chronological age, as I mentioned earlier, things such as puberty or menopause. That is based on normative age grade, okay? And then age-based social practices such as beginning school or entering retirement happen around the same time, okay? Now, when we're referring to normative history graded influences, this is associated with a specific time period that defines the broader environmental and cultural context in which an individual develops. So, development and identity are influenced by historical events that people experience. For example, this includes the Great Depression, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, and the War on Terror, as well as advances in technology, because we know those history-based events have an influence on how we develop. Now, non-normative influences are things that are unpredictable and not tied to a certain time in a person's development or to a historical period. Okay, so the unique experiences of an individual, whether biological or environmental, shape the developmental process. So some examples of non-normative influences include earning a master's degree. Not everybody goes directly after their bachelor's degree to get a master's degree. Some don't get a master's degree at all. Getting a certain job offer, that can vary from person to person. We're not all on the same timeline when it comes to career growth. Going through a divorce, some people will do so, maybe early on in life, later in life, or maybe not at all, as well as coping with the death of a child. These are all examples of non-normative influences. Okay, so let's look at some other contextual influences regarding socioeconomic status. So I'm going to refer to this a good bit throughout the class, but when you're referring to somebody's socioeconomic status, aka their social class, this is a way to identify families and households based on a few areas. This includes education, income, as well as occupation. So members of a social class tend to share similar lifestyles, patterns of consumption, parenting styles, stressors, religious preferences, and other aspects of daily life, although there are individual variations. Okay, so another contextual influence includes your culture. So often referred to as a blueprint shared by a group of people that specifies how to live. So what I mean by this is culture includes the ideas about the following: what is right versus wrong, what to strive for, what to eat, how to speak, what is valued, what kinds of emotions are called for in certain situations. Culture is learned from parents, schools, churches, media, friends, and others throughout a lifetime.